The clock tower had always stood like a sentinel over Eldridge, Maine. For 150 years, its hands never faltered. Its chimes echoed faithfully each hour, carving the town's daily rhythm into precise segments. Locals said you could set your life to it, and many did. But on October 14th at exactly 3:17 p.m., the gears groaned, shuddered, and stopped. Silence followed. Not just a pause, but a stillness that seemed to stretch deeper than any mechanical failure could explain. As if time itself had hesitated. That moment sent ripples through the town, but for a select few, it rang louder. Because 3:17 p.m. on October 14th wasn't just any moment. It marked exactly 17 years since Emily Rourke vanished inside that very tower. Before we unravel the secrets buried in this chilling mystery, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We explore the strangest true stories, and what you're about to hear will leave you questioning what time really means. They called her disappearance a tragedy, a mystery. Some whispered accident, others feared the word murder, but nobody could say for certain what happened to Emily Rourke, not back then, not now. 17 years ago, it was a crisp fall afternoon. The leaves were turning, red and gold, brushing the streets like nature's own countdown. Eldridge High School's junior class arrived at the clock tower for their annual field trip. The same tradition every year, always in October. Emily, 16, was the kind of girl who made you notice her without trying. She sketched constantly, little spirals, clocks, faces she said she saw in dreams. Not the loudest in the room, but never invisible. Sharp eyes, sharper wit, and a quiet confidence that drew people in. She wasn't reckless, but she was curious. She liked puzzles. She liked getting close enough to understand things no one else cared to. Her best friend said Emily had been obsessed with the tower that fall, said she'd spent hours reading about its construction, the original builders, the strange foreign names etched into the iron beams that no one had translated. She had questions no one answered. So when the class gathered at the base of the tower and the tour began, it felt almost inevitable. 30 students went in, 29 came out. At first, no one noticed. It wasn't until they were back on the school bus that a teacher realized they were one short. The group returned to the tower. They searched, they shouted. Some students ran crying into the street. The police were called within minutes. What followed was the largest search Eldridge had seen in 50 years. Local officers, state troopers, dogs, helicopters. For 3 days, they combed every inch of the tower and its surroundings. They drained a pond 2 blocks away. They tore up floorboards, broke into sealed maintenance tunnels, even brought in a psychic, though no one would admit it on record. Nothing. No blood, no clothes, no trail. It was as if Emily had walked into thin air. The case consumed the town. It made local news, then regional. For a week, her face was on every screen. Her sketches were printed in papers, hoping someone might recognize a location, a clue. Tips poured in. Most led nowhere. A few were too disturbing to repeat. Eventually, the frenzy faded. The posters came down. The town, unwillingly, moved on. But for some, time never did. Among them was Ben Calder. He'd been on that same trip, 17 years ago, just another high school junior. But unlike the others, Ben had seen something, or thought he had. A flicker of movement, a door where there shouldn't be one, and Emily stepping toward it. He'd never told anyone, not the police, not the teachers, not Emily's family. Maybe it was fear, maybe shame. Maybe he convinced himself it hadn't happened. That memory had twisted it. That trauma had rewritten what he thought he saw. But on October 14th, when the clock tower froze at 3:17, Ben knew. It wasn't over. It couldn't be a coincidence. Not the date, not the time, not the place. Ben, now 33, lived in Boston. He'd become a historical researcher, not surprising to those who remembered his endless questions in school. He hadn't been back to Eldridge in a decade. But the moment he heard about the tower, from an old classmate's post online, he packed a bag and left. He didn't tell his boss. He didn't call his family. There was only one thought pulsing through his mind. If the tower had started reacting now, after all these years, then maybe, just maybe, it was speaking. Maybe Emily had never left, and if that was true, he would find her. Even if it meant unlocking a past no one wanted to remember, even if it meant facing the truth about what happened that day, even if it meant breaking time itself. Ben stood beneath the shadow of the clock tower once more. The sight of it after all these years was unsettling. It looked unchanged. Same chiseled stone, same iron framework, same haunting silence. But now, something inside it had broken. The hands were frozen at 3:17, and that was no accident. 17 years had passed, but the weight of Emily's disappearance never left him. For most, time had softened the edges. People remembered her name, but not the shade of her voice. They recalled her story, not her laughter. But Ben remembered it all, and he remembered what he saw. No one ever asked him. The cops had focused on the last people seen near her. Friends, teachers, the janitor. Ben was just another face in the crowd. But he had stood by the stairwell, watching Emily pause before the upper landing. She'd looked confused, as if hearing something others didn't. Then she stepped forward and vanished from view. That moment, the sliver of movement, the shimmer in the air, he buried it deep. Now standing where it happened, the memory roared back. The tower had always intrigued him. As a teenager, he thought it felt alive, like it pulsed faintly with some hidden rhythm. Back then, he dismissed it as imagination. But after the disappearance, he couldn't stop thinking about it. The peculiar etchings, the soft vibrations in the railing, the hollow sound behind the walls. After high school, he left Eldridge behind and never looked back until now. He made his way to the town archive located in the basement of the old courthouse. Dust blanketed every surface, and the clerk, a man well past retirement age, barely looked up when Ben requested tower blueprints and incident reports. Most of the documents were redacted, water damaged, or missing entirely. But buried between brittle sheets, Ben found something unusual. A photocopy of an inspection note dated October 13, 2008. One day before Emily vanished. It referenced unusual magnetic readings near the tower's internal gears. The engineer wrote, "Gears shifted briefly at 3:17 during maintenance test, reset manually. Note anomaly for future review." Ben's heart raced. 3:17 again. It wasn't just the time of her disappearance, it was the time something inside the tower changed. And apparently it wasn't the first time. He snapped a photo and kept digging. Among the faded maintenance logs, he spotted another anomaly, multiple mentions of repairs to the bell housing made in secret after hours, with no official contractor listed. One name, however, kept repeating, J. Kiernan? He remembered that name. Kiernan had been the town's unofficial historian and clocksmith before passing away in 2015. Rumor had it he'd gone a little mad near the end, claiming the tower was alive with echoes. Ben knew what he had to do next. He drove to Kiernan's old workshop, now boarded up and half swallowed by ivy. The windows were broken, and the paint on the door had blistered in long strips. But inside the place was untouched. Dust had settled like snow across every surface, but the tools were still in place. Papers were scattered across a long bench, diagrams, schematics, and personal notes. He sifted through them, his eyes scanning for patterns. Many pages were nonsense, strange equations, scribbles in circles. But others were meticulous. Drawings of gears, each labeled with times and initials. At the bottom of one page, Emily's name appeared. His fingers trembled. One diagram, nearly torn in half, showed a cross-section of the tower with a hidden chamber beneath the central gear column. A handwritten note read, "Entry impossible until alignment at 3:17, only during mechanical stutter." Ben didn't understand all of it, but he understood enough. The tower didn't just keep time, it stored it, or bent it, or something worse. The sketches raised more questions than they answered, but they confirmed one thing: there was more to that tower than anyone had admitted. And whatever happened to Emily wasn't random. Back in his motel room, he pinned photocopies and sketches to the wall. A picture of the tower, a copy of Emily's last known school photo, the inspection note, Kiernan's schematic, and a line he couldn't forget, only during mechanical stutter. The tower had stuttered again, 17 years later, to the second. That couldn't be a malfunction. That was a message. The next morning, Ben returned to the tower with a flashlight and his notes. The entry gate was locked, but he'd expected that. He didn't need the front entrance. He circled to the alley behind the municipal building. There, behind a vine-covered wall, lay a forgotten access door. He remembered it from the blueprints. Kiernan had marked it. The door groaned as it opened. The air inside was thick, metallic, and cold. He stepped into the darkness, light cutting a narrow path forward. If the tower was calling him, he was ready to listen. And this time, he wouldn't look away. Ben had barely crossed the threshold before the chill hit him. It wasn't the cold of old stone or neglected spaces, it was deeper. A kind of stillness that seeped into the bones, heavy and watching. The flashlight beam flickered once, then held steady. He pressed on. But the tower wasn't the only place that remembered. Others carried fragments of that day. Others who, like Ben, had never really let it go. First was Maya Rourke, Emily's younger sister. She'd been 13 at the time of the disappearance, a shy girl with long braids and too many questions no one wanted to answer. Now 30, she was sharp, precise, and direct. She worked in digital forensics, solving online crimes from behind screens and servers. Her job required her to see patterns where others saw noise. Ben hadn't spoken to her in over a decade. Their last exchange had been brief and tense. She had looked at him like he owed her something, and maybe he did. He found her in a coffee shop on Main Street. She didn't seem surprised to see him. "You're here because the clock stopped," she said before he could speak. He nodded. "You think it means something?" "I know it does." She folded her arms. "Took you long enough." Ben hesitated. "I never told anyone, but I saw something that day right before she disappeared. I saw her walk toward... I don't even know what. It wasn't a door. It wasn't even supposed to be there." Maya's expression didn't change, but her eyes narrowed. "Why now, Ben?" He exhaled. "Because the tower stopped at 3:17, the exact time, 17 years later to the minute. That's not coincidence." She stared at him for a long time, then nodded once. "I've been waiting for something like this," she said. "I thought I was crazy, but lately, I've been having dreams. Same one, over and over." Ben leaned forward. "What kind of dreams?" "Emily," Maya said. "Behind glass. She's screaming, but no sound comes out. She keeps mouthing the same thing. It's not time yet." Ben felt a chill ripple across his skin. He had dreamed it too, he just hadn't told anyone. They agreed to meet the next day and start digging together. If there was something to be found, they'd find it. But first, Ben had one more person to visit. Sheriff Darren Pike had retired 5 years earlier. He lived just outside town, in a modest ranch house surrounded by pine. His dog barked when Ben knocked, and the old man answered the door with a suspicious glare. "Calder," he grunted. "Didn't think I'd see you back in these parts." "I need to talk about Emily," Ben said. The sheriff shook his head. "You people never give up. It's been 17 years. "She's not gone," Ben said. "Not like you think." That got the sheriff's attention. He stepped aside and let Ben in. The house smelled of tobacco and old coffee. Photos lined the mantel. Fishing trips, grandkids, a younger Pike in uniform. Ben told him about the tower freezing, the blueprints, Kiernan's notes. He didn't expect the sheriff to believe him. But Pike didn't argue. He just listened. Finally, he said, "You know, I never believed she ran off, but I couldn't find a trace, no prints, no fibers, no signs of a struggle. It was like the building swallowed her." Ben nodded. "What if it did?" Pike didn't laugh. He didn't call him crazy. Instead, he walked to a cabinet, pulled out a manila folder and handed it over. "Never filed this," he said. Didn't fit the narrative. Inside were photos, Emily's sketchbook pages. Pike explained they'd been found in a janitor's closet weeks after the disappearance. Most were ordinary, but a few were strange. One sketch showed gears tangled with roots. Another showed a figure trapped behind clock hands, eyes wide in panic. And one, dated weeks after she vanished, depicted the town square from an angle that didn't exist. Ben's breath caught. "Why didn't you show these before?" "Didn't want to be laughed off the force," Pike said. "Or worse, thought maybe I was losing it." Ben left with the folder, more certain than ever. There was one last person to see. Lorraine Miles had been the chaperone that day. She was the last teacher to see Emily before she disappeared. Since then, she'd retired, sold her house, and moved into a quiet apartment complex near the edge of town. Ben and Maya met her there. Lorraine was thinner, her eyes sunken but alert. "I figured you'd come one day," she said softly. "You saw something, didn't you?" Maya asked. Lorraine looked down. Her voice trembled. "She wasn't supposed to go up that far. I called to her, she didn't answer. Then I saw, I don't know how to explain it, a shimmer, like heat above pavement. She stepped into it, and then she was gone." Ben and Maya exchanged glances. "You never told anyone?" Ben asked. "They'd call me crazy," she whispered. "Maybe I was." "No," Maya said. "You weren't." Ben leaned forward. "And we think the tower is opening again." Lorraine closed her eyes. "Then you better be ready, because whatever took her, it wasn't finished." The tower felt different now, not just old or forgotten, awake, as if its silence was not from decay, but from listening. With the sheriff's folder, Lorraine's confession, and Kiernan's notes, Ben and Maya had enough to request special access through the town council. It took some convincing, but the promise of historical preservation opened the door, literally. They entered through the main chamber, where the familiar brass pendulum still hung, frozen mid-swing. Maya scanned the room like a forensic technician, noting every detail. Ben moved toward the spiral staircase. Each step groaned beneath them like a warning. Higher up, the gears loomed, great bronze and iron mechanisms once full of rhythm and precision. Now they rested in awkward silence. Maya paused beside a wall of switches and dials. Her fingers brushed across them gently, stopping at a rusted panel marked with a worn triangle symbol, 3 interlocked circles within it. "Kiernan drew this," she whispered. "It's on one of the blueprints." They pressed forward until they reached the catwalk surrounding the primary bell housing. It was there, behind a cluster of pipes and dust-choked vents, that they found it. A sealed panel of metal, different from the rest of the architecture. A thin, gear-shaped keyhole was etched into its surface. Ben reached into his coat and pulled out a strange brass key he'd found taped inside one of Kiernan's diagrams. He hadn't known what it was until now. It fit perfectly. The panel hissed open, revealing a narrow crawl space behind the wall. Cold air flowed from within. Maya turned on her flashlight. The beam caught stairs descending into complete darkness. "No record of this on any plan," she said. "Of course not," Ben replied. They descended. The staircase led them to a hidden chamber beneath the gear mechanisms, rough stone walls, damp with condensation. Old furniture, rusted tools, and shelves filled with decaying books surrounded them. It wasn't just a forgotten room, it was a workspace. Someone had lived here, or hidden here. At the center sat a table covered with papers sealed in protective plastic. On top lay a leather-bound sketchbook. Maya picked it up. Her breath caught. "It's Emily's," she said. She opened it carefully. The first pages were familiar, drawings of birds, clocks, spirals. But then the dates shifted. October 28th, 2008, November 2nd, November 13th, weeks after she disappeared. "This isn't possible," Maya whispered. The sketches changed. Abstract designs, perspectives from impossible angles, a recurring symbol, 3 concentric gears, and over again the same time written in the margins, 3:17. "She was alive after the disappearance," Ben said, "and she was here." In the final pages, the drawings became erratic, faces without eyes, walls bending inward, hands reaching from gears. And then, one image that stopped them cold, the tower's main chamber, drawn in vivid detail but with a shadowy figure watching from behind the clock face. The figure was labeled Time Watcher. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Maya placed the sketchbook gently in her bag. They explored further. Against one wall was a metal locker. Inside were more files, blueprints signed by Kiernan, photos of the tower from angles that defied geometry, and a sealed envelope addressed to the next one. Ben opened it. The letter inside was scrawled in shaky handwriting. If you found this, the gears have moved again. The mechanism isn't just timekeeping, it's time storing. Emily wasn't taken, she was caught. The cycle resets every 17 years. Only those marked by the tower can see the shift. I tried to stop it. I failed. Maybe you won't. The letter was unsigned. Ben sat heavily on a bench. He knew. Kiernan knew everything. Maya remained standing, her eyes scanning the sketches, her mind racing. Why that time? Why 3:17? What happened during the shift? Before Ben could answer, a deep, low groan filled the chamber. The gears above them, silent for days, shuddered. Not moving, but resisting. Something had been disturbed. Maya's flashlight flickered. A draft swept through the room, carrying the smell of rust, old oil, and something more acidic, like burned circuitry. Suddenly a loud clang echoed above. Then silence. Ben and Maya exchanged a look. Whatever this place was, it was waking up. They climbed back to the surface, locking the hidden chamber behind them. Outside, the tower loomed quietly. But they knew better now. The tower wasn't just hiding a girl. It was hiding a mechanism, a purpose, and Emily had drawn it. What they didn't yet know was whether she had become part of it. By the following morning, Eldridge was humming. It started with the clocks, wristwatches, ovens, dashboard displays. At exactly 3:17 p.m., every timepiece in town skipped, froze, or blinked. Just for a second. Just enough to notice. Then the hum began. A low-frequency vibration, more felt than heard, rippled through the downtown area. Not constant, intermittent like a pulse. No source could be located. But those close to the clock tower swore they heard something deeper, the sound of grinding metal, followed by a faint ticking like breath returning to a long-dead machine. Ben and Maya were back in the archive, piecing together whatever fragments Kiernan and others had left behind. They followed patterns in the notes, timelines marked by stutters and pulses in the gear system, all aligning with very specific dates, all 17 years apart. It's not random, Maya said. These stutters, every single one occurs on October 14th. And always at 3:17, Ben pointed to the oldest note they'd found. This one's from 1872. It says the bell rang 13 times during a noon test, one extra chime. No one knew why. The tower was inspected. One engineer went missing. Case closed. Maya traced her finger down the timeline. Then again in 1955. A child disappears from the square. He was never in the tower, never seen entering. But he was last spotted standing directly beneath the west face, looking up. Each anomaly came with a strange consequence. Gears skipping, bells ringing off time, whispered accounts of hallucinations, people claiming to hear voices through pipes or see shadows behind the gears, all pointed back to the tower's origin. It wasn't built just to keep time, Ben said. It was designed to manipulate it. Or trap it, Maya hesitated. Or sacrifice it. Ben looked up. What if it doesn't just track time? It balances something, and every 17 years it demands input, a correction. Maya closed her laptop slowly. That's what Kiernan was warning about, the cycle. He said he failed to stop it. Maybe Emily was the correction. They both sat in silence. Later that day, they visited Lorraine Miles again. The retired teacher was waiting for them, a small wooden box in her lap. I didn't remember this until I saw your faces again, she said. I kept it hidden for years. Thought it was just a strange souvenir. She opened the box and revealed an old brass coin, about the size of a silver dollar, etched with a design matching the tower's gear face. Around its edge were tiny symbols neither of them recognized, until Maya gasped. They're the same symbols Emily drew in the margins of her sketchbook. Ben picked up the coin. It was warm to the touch. I found it near the stairwell, the day she vanished, Lorraine said. It was just lying there, I didn't tell anyone. Maya examined it under the light. It's not just decorative. This could be a trigger or a key. As the sun dipped behind the rooftops of Eldridge, a strange light shimmered across the tower's bell face, just for an instant, like a reflection from nowhere. They returned to the tower immediately, the coin in hand. The hum intensified as they climbed. When they reached the bell housing, Ben felt it first, a pressure behind his eyes like something pushing against his perception. Then Maya stopped. "Do you hear that?" It was faint, but growing louder. Whispers, hundreds of them all at once, circling the chamber like wind between the gears. One voice rose above the others, a girl's voice. "Not yet." Maya froze. "It's her." Ben stepped toward the panel where they'd found the crawl space, but the gears behind it began to shift, very slowly, grinding forward. The tower hadn't moved in years. Now it was awakening. "We need to go," Maya said. But Ben didn't move. He placed the brass coin against the central gear column. A sudden pulse shot through the floor. The entire tower groaned. Then the whispering stopped. Maya stepped back, eyes wide. Ben, his hand hovered over the gear. He saw something flicker in the brass, an image, Emily, not a photo, not a memory, real, living, trapped. Her eyes met his. The vision vanished. Ben staggered back. "She's in there." Maya looked pale. "She's been in the tower this whole time." Ben nodded slowly. "But not in any place we understand." Outside, church bells rang 3:17 p.m. The hum ended. The silence was worse. They stood in the center of the tower, surrounded by gears that should have been dead, hearing the final click of something old falling back into place. Whatever was happening was far from over, and the tower had just reminded them this wasn't discovery. It was warning. They returned that night. The tower didn't just pull them, it compelled them, like gravity, like a memory that refused to stay buried. Ben carried the coin in his pocket. Maya held Emily's sketchbook tightly in her arms. The tower waited, silent but alert. Using Kiernan's blueprints and the diagrams from the hidden chamber, they located a panel beneath the main mechanism, a section of the floor that shifted slightly when pressure was applied. It opened into a narrow shaft with a ladder leading deep into the substructure. This part of the tower had no name. It didn't appear on any plan. They descended together. The shaft led to a corridor unlike anything they'd seen, narrow with walls lined in polished copper. Gears rotated silently behind glass panels. Some turned clockwise, others counter. The air was thin, electric, laced with the sharp scent of ozone and iron. The hum was gone, but a new sound replaced it, a rhythmic clicking like a heartbeat made of metal. Maya whispered, "It's a fault line, but not geological." Ben nodded. "A temporal rift, a seam in time." As they moved forward, the corridor warped, not physically but perceptually. The further they walked, the less certain they were of distance, of direction. Maya's flashlight began to cast shadows where there were no corners. Reflections shimmered in the copper walls, images of themselves, younger, older, twisted, just slightly wrong. Then they saw her, not directly, just a flicker. A girl in a school uniform, auburn hair. She walked ahead of them, barefoot, silent, disappearing around a bend. "Emily!" Maya shouted. They ran. The corridor opened into a chamber of mirrors and brass. Dozens of panels reflected endless versions of themselves, and in the center, a gear the size of a door, rotating so slowly it looked still. It was marked with a faint engraving. ER. Emily Rourke. Maya stepped closer, drawn to the initials. Her hand reached out, trembling. The moment her fingers brushed the gear's cold metal, a flash of light exploded around them. She was gone. Ben shouted her name, no response. The chamber distorted. Reflections twisted, lights dimmed. The gear now spun in reverse. He staggered back, heart pounding, unsure of what he'd just witnessed. Then, a burst of pressure, and Maya reappeared. She collapsed into his arms, gasping, eyes wide with shock. Her skin was cold, her breath ragged. Ben steadied her. "What did you see?" Maya looked at him, pupils dilated. "I saw her, I saw Emily, but not here, not now." He helped her sit. Her hands trembled as she opened the sketchbook. She was in a corridor like this one, but brighter. There were windows, looking out at places that couldn't exist. Skies with 3 moons, cities built upside down. She wasn't alone, but no one else moved. Ben frowned. "How did you get back?" Maya shook her head. "I didn't. The gear brought me. I touched it again, but it took everything just to let go." She flipped to a page Emily had drawn, a hallway with twisted angles and a girl behind a glass panel, hand pressed to the surface. In the corner, scrawled in faint pencil, "It's not time yet." Ben looked toward the gear. "She's trapped inside the loop," he said. "Living the same 5 minutes over and over." Maya nodded. "And if we're not careful, we'll join her." They rose together, still unsteady. The chamber vibrated faintly now, as if breathing. The gear had stopped moving. "Whatever this place is," Ben said, "it's connected to the main tower. It feeds off the mechanism above. That's why everything happened at 3:17. That's when it opens." Maya looked back at the gear. "So how do we find her again?" Ben's voice was quiet. "We don't wait for time to open the door. We break it open." They returned to the surface, but the tower no longer felt the same. The air was charged, the shadows deeper, the ticking beneath the silence more distinct. The gear chamber had shifted something inside both of them. Maya sat in the tower's main stairwell, flipping through Emily's sketchbook. "She's alive," she said. "I felt her. She looked right at me." Ben nodded. "She's not just stuck in time. She's guarding something, or being used to contain it." They didn't say it aloud, but both knew. The tower wasn't a prison for Emily. It was a prison built with her. And if they opened the way again, they would have to face whatever had been locked inside with her. Ben knew he couldn't ask Maya to go back down. Not after what she'd seen, not after how violently the gear had thrown her back. But he also knew the tower wouldn't wait. The mechanism had moved. The loop was shifting again, and whatever Emily had become part of, it was active. She gave him the sketchbook without a word. Their eyes met, no speech, just shared certainty. He took the coin, the key, and went alone, back down the shaft into the corridor of copper and mirrors. This time, the passage greeted him. The lights pulsed faintly, not electrical, but rhythmic, like the beating of a colossal clock heart. The smell of rust and ozone was sharper now, like the tower was bleeding. Ben moved quickly, following the echoes. He reached the gear marked with Emily's initials. It wasn't spinning this time. He placed the coin against its center. No resistance, no shudder, only silence. Then the floor beneath him dropped, not physically, but perceptually. He felt himself falling, not through space but through time, not backward or forward but sideways, like skipping frames in an old film reel. He shut his eyes against the blur. When he opened them, everything was different. The chamber was brighter. Gears turned with smooth, impossible grace. The air was warm, and in front of him stood Emily, 16 years old, unchanged, alive. She looked at him with wide, startled eyes. "Ben?" Her voice cracked. How did you find me?" He stepped forward carefully. "I saw you, through the tower. The sketches, the gear. You've been here all this time?" Emily nodded slowly. "Time doesn't pass here. It repeats. I live the same few minutes until someone comes close. Then it resets again, like a trap built from memory." Ben looked around. The chamber was a twisted echo of the real one, stretched and symmetrical in ways that defied physics. Gears ticked in reverse. Light came from nowhere. "Why are you still here?" he asked. "Why can't you leave?" Emily shook her head. "Because I made a mistake. I followed the sound. It was beautiful, like a melody in the gears. I thought I found a secret, but it wasn't a secret. It was a seal. I opened something, and the tower didn't let me go." Ben's breath caught. "What did you open?" Emily hesitated, her voice trembling. "A door. It wasn't physical. It was..." like the wall between now and other, and behind it there was something. Ben leaned closer. Something what? Her eyes darkened. A voice, a watcher. It said it needed time, that every cycle required a presence. It chose me. Ben's stomach dropped. You're part of the loop now, she nodded. I've been holding it shut. Every stutter, every freeze, it's the tower resisting the break, but the mechanism is weakening. He turned, examining the gear structure. If I get you out, will it break the loop? Emily looked afraid. If I leave, something else leaves too. Ben felt it then. The pressure behind the gears, not just time compressed, but intention, as if something intelligent had been listening. He stepped closer. I'm not leaving without you. Emily shook her head. You can't stay. You'll become part of the mechanism. You'll forget who you are. I almost have. He touched her shoulder. Then we'll remember together. Suddenly the light dimmed. The gears groaned. The floor pulsed. Time stuttered. Emily cried out, "It's happening again!" Ben turned as shadows bled into the chamber. Shapes without form, whispers too old for language. Emily fell to her knees. "The seal is weakening!" Ben reached into his coat, pulled out the coin. It glowed faintly. He pressed it to the center gear. The gears stopped. Silence. Emily looked up. Her face bathed in stillness. You paused it, the whole loop. Ben exhaled, heart pounding. Then this is the moment. You choose. Stay or go. Her hand trembled in his. I don't remember what it feels like, she said. To be outside. He nodded. Then let me remind you. A crack rippled through the chamber. The air warped. Emily screamed. Ben pulled her close. Hold on. Light burst from the floor, pure white. The shadows screamed in silence. The entire chamber folded inward, and they vanished. There was no sky, no floor, no direction. Ben and Emily hung suspended in a place that felt stitched from fragments of memory and dream. Below them, the tower gears floated mid-spin. Around them, moments flickered, childhood laughter, old clock faces, shadows reaching for nothing. Time here had no shape. Emily gripped Ben's hand tightly. This is the veil, the boundary between the loop and the core. He nodded, steadying himself. We're not in the tower anymore. No, she said. We're in the mechanism. The space shifted, folding into a room that was not a room, a circular platform surrounded by gears the size of houses. In the center, a pedestal glowing with faint gold light. Inscribed along its edge were names, hundreds of them, old, some in languages lost to history, but one stood out. Emily Rourke. Ben traced it with his finger. What is this? He whispered. Emily's voice was quiet. The ledger. Suddenly the air trembled. A voice filled the space, not loud, but deep enough to make their bones vibrate. She is not yours to free. The platform shuddered. A shape appeared above the pedestal. A figure made of moving gears, clocks for eyes and no face. Its limbs were shifting arms of brass and glass. Ben stepped in front of Emily. What are you? Timekeeper. Ben narrowed his eyes. You built the tower. We did not build. We bound. Emily stepped forward. You used me. You are the seal. You were chosen when the mechanism faltered. A moment of chaos requires a soul of symmetry. You entered, you fit. Ben clenched his fists. She was a girl. She was time, unclaimed, unmeasured. You gave her meaning. We gave her purpose. The platform pulsed. Images burst around them. Visions of the original builders, men with brass tools carving runes into stone, sealing time like a current inside a dam. The tower wasn't a monument. It was a valve. Every century it needed a sacrifice to keep the pressure from bursting through. Each loop must hold, or your world shatters. Ben looked at Emily, her eyes filled with tears. I didn't ask for this, she said. The timekeeper tilted its head. Choice was illusion. Presence was permission. Ben stepped toward it. Then choose me. Silence. The gears slowed. "You would bind yourself in her place?" "I will," Ben said. "Let her go." Emily grabbed his arm. "No." He turned. "You've been in here for 17 years, Emily. You didn't choose this. I did. I came back. I opened the path." She shook her head. "If you take my place, we both lose. I've seen what waits behind the loop. I held it back. It's not just time. It's everything broken." Ben hesitated. "Then how do we stop it?" The timekeeper moved to the edge of the pedestal. Its hands unfolded like petals into a spinning array. "You must balance the gears, complete the cycle, not by sealing, but by ending." Emily looked up. "If we shut the tower down, forever?" The valve breaks, time flows, the loop ceases, but the risk is chaos. Collapse. Ben looked between them. Or freedom. A pause. Then the voice softened. "Your world will fracture, but it may heal." He turned to Emily. "We end this. Together." She nodded. The timekeeper extended its hand, an ancient key forged from moving parts and glowing edges. "Turn it within the core, but know this, there is no return." Ben took the key. As soon as he did, the space began to collapse. Not violently, but in reverse. Gears slowed. Lights dimmed. The platform dissolved into shadow. They ran, through collapsing corridors of echo and brass, through fragments of memory. They passed flashes of their own lives, childhood birthdays, rainy windows, scraped knees, and whispered regrets. Then, the core. A final chamber of infinite clock faces, all spinning at different speeds. At the center, a massive clock, the original gear of the Eldridge Tower. Its hands frozen at 3:17. Ben approached. He inserted the key into the center. Emily placed her hand on his. Together, they turned it. The hands of the great clock began to move. The chamber cracked. A blast of golden light surged out in every direction, washing the space clean. The timekeeper dissolved into dust. And then, the loop shattered. Maya felt the shift before she saw it. The tower's outer walls pulsed with a faint, unnatural glow. From the town square, it looked like the building was breathing. Faint vibrations spread outward from its base, causing windows to rattle and streetlights to flicker. The clock face no longer displayed time. Instead, it turned blank, silver-white and unreadable. She grabbed the sketchbook and ran. She wasn't alone. Lorraine Miles waited at the base of the tower, pale but resolute. Behind her stood Sheriff Pike, holding a duffel of tools and equipment he'd kept since the first investigation. "What's happening in there?" Lorraine asked. Maya didn't answer. She didn't have the words, but she knew where to go. Using Emily's drawings and Kiernan's last blueprint, they located the outer gear passage, the fault line corridor. It trembled now, destabilizing with every second. They pushed through. Inside, time buckled. The walls shifted. The path folded onto itself. Doors appeared and vanished. Sound warped, echoing backward. Lorraine clutched Pike's arm, muttering prayers under her breath. Maya stayed focused. She followed the spiral. Every detail in the sketchbook led them forward, until finally, they reached it. A chasm of golden light poured from the center of the core. The mechanism had cracked wide open. Gears twisted and split in midair. Reflections of past and future flickered like lightning, and standing at the edge, Ben and Emily. But something was wrong. Ben was flickering, not like the gears. Like memory. "Ben!" Maya screamed. He turned, but his eyes were different, like he was already halfway gone. Emily held his hand. She looked 17 years older now. Her body shimmered between past and present, fighting to stabilize. "You're here," she said to Maya. Her voice trembled. "You followed the loop." Maya stepped forward. "You can't stay here. The tower's breaking." Emily nodded. "We opened the seal. The cycle is over." Ben turned to her, but not without cost. Maya saw it then. The gear, the master seal, had stopped, but something was leaking from it. A black mist, oily and cold, pouring through the cracks. The loop was gone, but the prison door was open, and whatever had been locked away now stirred. "We have to go," Maya said. Ben smiled, faint and distant. "You do?" Emily froze. No, we go together." "You're tethered to the tower," Ben said. "Not anymore by force, but by memory. That's how it held you." She shook her head. "I remember everything now. My parents, my room, the sound of my sister's laugh. I know who I am." Ben touched her face. "And that's why you can return." Maya stepped toward him. "Ben, don't do this." He didn't answer. Instead, he turned toward the collapsing gear and stepped into the pedestal light. The tower shook violently. Cracks formed along the ceiling. Chunks of brass and steel rained down. The mist screamed. Emily was hurled backward, straight into Maya's arms. There was no time. Maya grabbed her hand and ran. The return was a blur, corridors melting, doors folding, time collapsing inward. Behind them, the last echo of Ben's presence flickered out. And then light. They burst through the tower's front door, just as the final groan echoed from within. The Eldridge clock tower trembled one last time. Then the entire central mechanism collapsed into itself, like an imploding lung, and stopped. Forever. The clock face cracked and fell. The hands never moved again. The tower was silent. Not paused. Ended. They carried her out in silence. Emily Rourke, no longer the vanished teen frozen in time, but a grown woman pulled through 17 lost years. Her face bore the weight of them. Time she had not aged through, but time she had carried within. The paramedics asked questions, so did the press. None received real answers. Maya shielded her sister from the noise. Sheriff Pike handled the chaos with quiet finality, offering only one statement to the crowd gathered in the square. "The tower is closed, permanently." Lorraine disappeared quietly after that. Maya took Emily home. There were no homecomings, no balloons, no easy joy. Instead, there was healing. Slow. Uneven. Emily didn't speak much at first. She wandered through rooms she barely remembered, touched objects that had once belonged to a world she thought lost. She relearned everything, technology, culture, even her own reflection. But what she never forgot was Ben. He was in her dreams, not as a ghost, but as a memory that pulsed with meaning, a presence woven through her return. She would wake and whisper his name. Not out of sorrow, but reverence. Maya documented everything. The sketchbook became a journal. Her forensic skills helped her structure Emily's story into patterns of evidence and phenomena. She created a private archive, filled with photos, timelines, scans of Kiernan's notes, and the full sequence of the tower's activation. The gear, the coin, was gone. So was the timekeeper's mark. But Emily still bore a faint scar on her palm, where her hand had touched the central gear. She never told Maya what she had seen beyond the loop. Not all of it. Only fragments, glimpses of other towers, other times, other versions of herself. "I wasn't the first," she once said. Maya asked, "But maybe you're the last?" Emily smiled. Maybe. As autumn turned to winter, the town of Eldridge did something no one expected. They held a vigil, not for mourning, but for closure. They lit candles in the square. They placed sketches of clocks along the sidewalks. The tower remained in place, scarred, hollowed, but no longer feared. Time had resumed, but not with ticking gears or bell chimes, with breath, with choice. On the night of the vigil, Emily stood by the ruins of the tower. A small plaque had been placed on the old entrance, engraved with names, hers, Ben's, and others, lost over the decades. At the bottom it read, "Time may break, but memory rebuilds." She ran her fingers across Ben's name. "You came back," she whispered. "You broke the loop. You gave me time." And then she reached into her pocket. She pulled out her last sketch. It was drawn in the hospital the day after she awoke. It showed Ben standing in front of a broken clock face, light pouring behind him. He was smiling, not the way he had in life, but freer, like a man released from duty. She placed it gently at the base of the plaque. The wind lifted the corners, but it didn't fly away. As people gathered behind her, holding candles and humming softly, Emily turned to Maya. "Think they'll ever believe it all?" Maya smirked. "They don't have to. We were there. We remember." They stood together in the quiet, and in that silence, not a sound echoed from the tower. Not a chime, not a hum, only stillness and peace. If this story left you breathless, don't forget to hit subscribe. There are more mysteries waiting, real tales that bend logic, time, and truth. And if you want to dive into another unforgettable story, click the video on your screen now. Trust us, what happens in that one will haunt you just as deeply.